In the lectionary we're looking at the time of Jesus picking his 12 disciples. Now, here's a fun little party trick you can bring out if you ever want to name all 12 disciples. I don't like to give you too many tricks of memorizing things, not really the point, but this is a fun one. So, fun. If you do ever want to recite the 12 disciples by name, why a situation would ever occur where you'd want to do that, I don't know, but I'm going to share this with you now, no matter what. Excuse me. It goes like this. You start with psst, P-P-S-T-T, psst. Then ABM, like automatic banking machine. And then the 4 J's. So psst, P-P-S-T-T, Peter, Philip, Simon, Thaddeus, and Thomas. Automatic banking machine, ABM. Andrew, Bartholomew, Matthew. Then the 4 James. James, John, the brothers, James the Lesser, worst nickname ever, and, drum roll, of course, Judas. So Peter, Philip, Simon, Thaddeus, Thomas, Andrew, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, John, James, and Judas. These are the 12 disciples. Now, what can you do with that information? Very, very little. Maybe sometime in the future you'll be recording a video and you'll bring that up as a little trick for your people. I don't know. It's just something that's been with me for years. And that kind of gets to the point, because what do we do with a lot of knowledge? What is the point of being smart? What is actual smart, and what is actually just being able to recite trivia? And what do we mean really by the word smart? Do we mean book smart? Do we mean street smart? Do we mean emotionally smart? Do we mean maturity? What do we mean by smart? If you're good with cars, is that a kind of smart? If you're good in a field or a garden, which I am not, you all know, is that a kind of smart? And the answer is, of course, yes. Being smart, being intelligent is, and has been in our culture, somewhat limited in scope to how well you do on exams or how well you do in school. And you know me, I went about as far in school as you can go. I teach now. And still, I want to recognize the fact that book smart is only one kind of smart. And in many ways, not an overly practical kind of smart either. I remember driving with a friend of mine, we were both PhD students at the time, so PhD students, and we're driving around trying to find a restaurant. And for the life of us, we couldn't. We were late to meet some other people. And he finally, in frustration, is like, "We have PhDs. Why can't we find this restaurant?" To which I replied, "It's because we have PhDs. We can't find this restaurant. We don't necessarily function in the real world, so we stick to the classroom." And that is the sort of humorous way I'm hoping to sort of frame this turn, because we've also got this letter from Paul to the Corinthians in which he says, "Now concerning food sacrificed to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Anyone who claims to know something does not yet have the necessary knowledge, but anyone who loves God is known by him. Hence, as to the eating of food offered to idols, we know that no idol in the world really exists, and that there is no God but one." Then he goes on to explain there's a bunch of different things that are classified. And then he goes on to say in verse 8, "Food will not bring us close to God." It's very disappointing, because there's been some meals that I thought were cooked by God himself. "We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if others see you who possess knowledge eating in a temple of an idol, might they not, since their consciences are not fully formed yet, be encouraged to the point of eating food sacrificed to idols? So by your knowledge, those who are weaker have been destroyed. But when you thus sin against a member of your own family and wound their conscience when it is weak, you've actually sinned against Christ. Therefore, if food is a cause of someone else's falling or stumbling, I'm never going to eat meat around them, so that I may not cause even one of them to stumble or fall." And this is the point of why I like St. Thomas Aquinas so much, because he was incredibly intelligent, genius level. To the Catholics of today, he is considered the doctor of the church. Not a doctor, the doctor of the church. But Thomas Aquinas always measured off his intelligence with his compassion, his kindness, and his ability to exude grace. There is all sorts of different kinds of intelligences, and they all deserve to be celebrated. And as I said before, sometimes in our society, we have a very narrow definition of what or who is smart. I mean, if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it's going to look like a failure. It's because there's nothing wrong with a fish. We forced the fish out of its element. And I know many of you have struggled with this. Many of you have maybe not been comfortable defining smart as a characteristic. And I want to caution you against that. Because I know everybody listening to this, maybe that might not be true, but the people I do know that are listening to this, I know are very intelligent, very capable, very giving of their insights. But more importantly than that, and as Thomas Aquinas said, I may not understand the definition of the word compassion. I may not know its history. I may not know its roots. I may not be able to define it if people ask. But it's much more important if I am compassionate, rather than if I can define what being compassionate is. And Paul's letter to Corinth was talking about the fact that in that time, in that society, of course, there were foods sacrificed to idols, all these different gods. He says there are no other gods. There's only one God. So the question becomes, well, can you eat food sacrificed to idols, or are you getting too invested in pagan, anti-God practices? And he has a very nuanced, clever way of saying, like, listen, building on what Jesus said, it's not the food that goes into your body, it's the words that come out of your mouth that actually contaminate you. Paul says, let's build on that. If you know who God is, if you have the ability to discern and figure these things out, then it's really, whether it was sacrificed to an idol or not, is not really the issue. But for some people in your family, that might be. And they may feel, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But then if they see you doing it, they're like, oh, okay. And even if you've come to the conclusion that maybe this isn't so bad, and actually this doesn't impact my relationship with God, you could be causing someone else for whom this will impact their relationship with God because of the meaning they've put into this food. And if they see you eating, they're like, oh, okay, then it's okay to not just eat the food, but eat the food as an act of worship to this other God and not see the difference between the two. So for Paul, he says, listen, if it comes down to that, just don't eat it. If it comes down to putting yourself or honoring a situation that you know would cause another person, another member of your family to stumble, then the compassionate thing, the loving thing is to take yourself out of the situation for love of that fellow family member. And this is his great line. Knowledge puffs up, love builds up. It's fun to be smart. It's a compliment, it's cool, nobody's ever like, oh, I'm entirely too smart. Not at all. But smart can also lead to arrogance. Arrogance can lead to pride, vanity, and destruction of others. Smart can lead to looking down, thinking higher of ourselves. This is what knowledge can do. Just because you know a bunch of stuff doesn't mean you're gonna use it well. Every villain in history and in every movie are all very smart people, but they are not good people. And this is another great beauty of the gospel, is that Jesus' selection of the disciples, he was selecting people. Some were smart, like Matthew, the tax collector, like the apostle Paul, brilliant scholar. But most worked hard, were simple people. And Jesus saw their intellect, their ability to form faith. And they created the faith that came after Jesus, the faith of Christianity. And so we follow in this beautiful gospel story. And I heard a scholar once say, the gospel is so beautiful and so complex. It's shallow enough that a child could play in it. And it's deep enough that it could drown an elephant. There's so many layers to this gospel. And some people will be biblical scholars and be able to dig into that. And other among us will have simple, beautiful, profound faith. The scholar is not smarter than the person of simple faith. It's a different kind of smart. It's a different kind of intelligence. And as always, more important than being smart is being kind, gracious. And that we build up We send the love of God that dwells within us out into the world. That's amazing. So, to go back to Peter, Philip, Simon, Thaddeus, Thomas, Andrew, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, John, James, and Judas, how useful is that information? Not really. Do you start to be able to recite that? Yeah, kinda. But again, what is more important? Can you define the word compassion, or can you embody the word compassion? My vote's for the second one. God bless you and keep you, you wonderful, kind, gracious, smart followers of Christ. Amen, amen, amen.